Okay, are we good? I can't see. Nothing popped up. So we're good? We can go?
Let's see, make sure. Yes, now we're recording. Good.
I was about to say, the red light just came on, so now I can see.
Okay.
So good morning, y'all. My name is Ginger Koestler. If we've not met yet, I am the behavior intervention specialist on the intervention team. Somehow, y'all don't even know how, but I came to be the 504 contact at MDE. I have a background in special education, and when I came to the department, they said essentially like, what do you know about 504? And I said, very little. And they said, okay, well, you're a new person, so you're gifted with the job. Go find it, go learn. So y'all, I'm going to spend just a few minutes with y'all talking about kind of the 411 on 504. This is going to be a very high level. I'm trying to watch the chat, y'all, so we can talk. But this is a very high level 504 overview. If we need to get more in depth with you or your district, we can absolutely do that at a different time. But I was just going to try to give the basics this morning about what is 504, who is eligible for 504, and then really what does the law behind 504 require. Okay. So like we said, we have new slide presentation. So y'all check this out. Is our 6 statewide goals at our plan, or our state board has laid out in our strategic plan. The goals have not changed, just the graphics to try to make them, more visually appealing. And so y'all, what we really want to look at in here is we want all of our students showing proficiency and growth in all of our areas. We want them graduating and being college and career ready. And the other one that we really hit on is that we want all of our districts rated a C or higher. So this is our vision and our mission. They haven't changed, just their presentation. We want to make sure that we're creating a world-class education system. People all over the country are looking at Mississippi because of our reading and math scores on NAEP. So we really want to shine, y'all. We want to give kudos to y'all, but we also want to make sure that we're shining for our students. And we want to make sure we're providing our leadership for our districts and for our states. That's our mission as a department. Okay, y'all. So we're going to talk about what is 504. I mean, y'all, we hear about it all the time. I think we talk around it sometimes and not really talk about what it really is. So y'all, Section 504 is part of the ADA. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is actually a sister law to IDEA. So y'all, and that IDEA is the special education law. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. 504 ADA is a general education statute. Okay, y'all. So let me say that, for my friends in the back, or if anybody needs to hear it, a student who is considered 504 is a general education student. They are not a special education student if they only meet 504. I like to explain it as, those huge golf umbrellas, those big, massive umbrellas. Think about that as Section 504. Hey, y'all, we have an echo. So you'll make sure you sorry. But think about Section 504 or the ADA is that huge golf umbrella, and then IDEA or special education as a smaller umbrella that fits under that golf umbrella. So all students who are qualified for IDEA or special education also qualify under ADA or 504 or eligible. But there are going to be some students who don't necessarily fit under the smaller umbrella, but still fit under that bigger umbrella. But our students who are eligible under Section 504, they're general education students. 504 is a general education statute, y'all, but it's also a civil rights statute. It's supposed to be anti-discriminatory. Okay. And I think I say this later, but when we talk 504, MDE does not have direct authority with ADA in Section 504. when they wrote the law, when the U.S. Department wrote the law, they didn't give state LEAs authority with it. They kept it. So it's actually housed, or it is actually enforced by the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. So there's only certain things we as a state can do with it. The U.S. Department, if there's ever a grievance or ever anything gets, done, actually the Office for Civil Rights is who does it. Okay, so let's talk about who's eligible. So what the law around 504 says is that a student or an individual has to have a disability, either physical or mental impairment, that substantially limits one or more major life activities. They can have a record of such impairment, or they can be regarded as having that impairment. So y'all, what that really means is that there's like 3 big ones that have to fit in there. You have to have a disability, but again, y'all, it doesn't define disability. So with special education, there are 13 categories, and you have to fit into those 13 categories. This one just says a disability. It doesn't define disability. It has to substantially limit, and it doesn't, the law is super gray. I was tempted to wear a real gray shirt today and say it depends, but it's a very open law. It has to substantially limit. What substantially limit or what limit looks like is up for you as a district to define. And it has to affect one or more major life activities. So y'all, a major life activity isn't defined. It can be eating, sleeping, talking, walking, learning, reading, attention. There are all sorts of activities that fall under those major life activities. The student, if the student currently doesn't have one of those things, doesn't meet that criteria, they can have a record of it. So they may have a previous diagnosis that shows that they have a record of having this impairment. Or you may be regarded as having it. So y'all, it's very loose, it's very open. But that is technically straight, y'all, I copied and pasted from OCR's website on how they define who is eligible under Section 504. Okay? As a district, what are y'all's responsibilities? As an LEA, this is what you have to do. You have got to have a board-approved policy and a district contact person. That's the key. That's huge, y'all. That's a big one. Because we're going to talk about it here in a minute. We're going to talk about the policy more. That policy is what drives what you're held to as a district. So you guys, and I'm not sure who's on the call, but you guys may want to get a hold of your district policy and be very familiar with it. You need to know, I'm supposed to do this, this, and this with it. This is who our contact person is if a parent needs to get in contact with them, kind of thing. And make sure it's up to date, kind of thing. But y'all, 504, we might have heard, or some of y'all may be familiar with the term, a free appropriate public education. So that FAPE requirement is in IDEA, but it's also in 504. So be aware of that. We've got to provide that appropriate education for our students who qualify for under Section 504. And there's a little bit of crossover too. There's also a child fine requirement under 504. There is a manifestation determination report if we get into a discipline situation under 504 too. So there's a little bit of crossover between IDEA and Section 504, but just know that you've got to provide that appropriate education for these students. We need to make sure that our teachers are trained in your policies and practices. So as a district, you have this policy, your teachers need to know it. We need to make sure that there's nobody out there saying, oh, we don't do 504. Y'all would be surprised at the parent calls that I get that they said, oh, well, they don't really do that. Make sure your teachers know that you have a policy and that this is available for our kids who may need it. And then y'all, we need to make sure we have a plan for ensuring our implementation. So it's one thing to write a 504 plan, but we need to make sure that it's being followed. So you need somebody in that building following up, making sure that it's appropriate for the student, making sure that it doesn't need to be adjusted or, edited or, updated in any way. And y'all, with that, we need to make sure, and y'all know this is my soapbox, make sure you have that open two-way communication with your families. We need to make sure we have those relationships in place so that if something isn't working and we need the family to come in to have a meeting, we can do so, or, a Zoom meeting or however we're doing it at this point. Okay, let's talk about district policies. So what does your district policy need to include, y'all? We need to make sure it establishes eligibility under Section 504. Y'all need a plan. So as a parent, make a request. I make it to the district contact person. Your district policy needs to lay out that process. Okay, well, we're going to give it to, Ms. Weathersby has made a request. We give it to Ms. Koestler. Ms. Koestler knows to set up the meeting, get with the teachers, get the required documentation we're going to need, that kind of thing. So make sure your LEA, make sure your policy includes that eligibility procedures. It may also include, y'all, what you're going to ask in the meeting. So like what documentation you may need. Do we need to pull grades? Do we need to know if there's an outside diagnosis? Do we need to know if this child's in the MTSS process for whatever reason? It needs to establish, this is our criteria for establishing eligibility. Because that law is so broad, y'all. You as a district have an opportunity to really lay out that process. Your policy needs to make sure that who to contact and how to contact them. So y'all, I'm going to caution you here. It needs to know who to contact, but not necessarily that person's name. You may include like let's say, I know a lot of situations, the special education director is also the 504 coordinator. It may need to say, contact the special education director and maybe list the office number, because those positions can turn over and you don't want to have to rewrite or have to go back through full board approval to change the name of the contact person. But just give a good general number so that if a parent gets a hold of the policy, then yes, they know who to contact. Like I said, you're going to need any documentation to establish that eligibility, but your plan needs to your policy needs to lay out what is included in your documentation. So like I worded it as LEA developed documentation. So y'all, what's your plan going to look like? What does that 504 plan need to include? So y'all, this is just a fun aside, but actually the only required written documentation under 504 is your policy. A 504 plan, according to OCR, doesn't even have to be a written plan. You guys can sit in a meeting, agree upon what needs to happen. I'm going to tell you best policy or best practice is write it down and make everybody in that room like list their names because they helped develop it. But technically, it doesn't have to be a written plan. It can just be what's agreed upon in the meeting. I would suggest, and this is Ginger talking, I would suggest having and we're going to talk about your plans here in a minute, but I would suggest creating something for your district that's uniform across the district and putting that with everything so that you know that it's consistent across the district and you know exactly what has to be in there. So y'all, I'll also say that your policy needs to include your operation timelines. With IDEA and special education, we have very tight, y'all know, you have 14 days to hold a MET meeting. You have 60 days to do the testing. You have 2 weeks to have an eligibility meeting, and then you have 30 days to implement a IEP. 504 doesn't have those. It doesn't have any hard and fast timelines in it. It does have that FAPE requirement, so we want to make sure that we're doing it in a timely manner because we don't want to be accused or, be found guilty of not providing a FAPE. But it doesn't have, there's no like hard and fast rules about when you have to have meetings. So I would suggest putting that in your policy. Hold yourself accountable to this is what we're going to do. And actually, y'all, when we talk about reevaluations under 504, y'all know with special education and IDEA, it's very specific. It says you have to have a reeval every 3 years. With 504, just says periodically. It also says periodically for reviews. So, with special education and those IEPs, we have to review those annually. With 504, the law leaves it open to interpretation. It just says periodically. So be aware, y'all. I would not go over a year. I think a year is a great kind of, good solid timeline for your 504 reviews. But your district policy can lay that out specifically about what you're going to do. And y'all, this is a big one, and I actually got a call on one of these yesterday. We want to make sure that we have a grievance section in our 504 policies, because our parents are going to disagree with us at some point. We need to make sure we have a procedure for addressing those parent concerns or those parent disagreements, and lay that out about how we're going to follow up with that. We also need to have some type of statement or something in there about a discipline procedure. I mentioned earlier, y'all, 504 students are considered students with disabilities, but they are not considered students with special education eligibility. They are general ed students. However, they are entitled to a manifestation determination at a suspension situation. So just know that you need to have those discipline procedures in your policy just to protect you guys. Okay, so let's talk about what the plan needs to have. You guys, most of the time, 504 plans include your accommodations. So this is really kind of the crux of it, y'all. You need to list things that are going to have some adaptations. It can be changes to the environment, like you're going to take that test in a quiet space. We can add classroom, changes where we're going to check in frequently on key concepts, making sure they have that good background knowledge, making sure that they're catching on with those big topics so that they don't fall behind. It can be changes to the curriculum, like the way it's presented. So like some students may require an outline, things like that. We really want to stick to the fact that your accommodations don't change what the student is expected to learn, just how they're learning it. The goal, like I said earlier, is anti-discrimination. It's to level the playing field between these students with disabilities and their non-disabled peers. We want to remove the barriers and give them access to that learning. So y'all, there's no template. There's no specific set of rules for what the 504 plan has to include, or even what it looks like, y'all. There's no required elements. That's why I suggest as a district, you guys develop some type of form or some type of documentation that you can just making sure that, everybody is consistent and you're getting on it what you need to. Okay, y'all. So that was really fast, and I'm going to look here in the chat here in a second and answer questions. That's my email, and this is all of us in our office. I know we share this all the time, but if y'all ever need anything, this is kind of our areas that we specialize in. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully be able to look at the chat. Hang on.
Hey, Ginger.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did have a couple questions.
Okay. I knew we would. Y'all, this is a hot topic. I knew that we would have lots of questions.
Okay, so Amy asked, would you go into the child fine and discipline that you mentioned for the 504?
Okay, y'all. So it actually, Amy, I think, Amy, are you the SPED director? No, you're not. Okay. I was trying to look to see, maybe you were the SPED director. So it is the exact same requirements as special education as far as child fine and discipline.
Okay, so what I guess my question is, like, the way we're implementing this now is if I have a 504 student and that student is showing maybe signs that they need to be tested for special ed, that's when I fill in a child fine form. Is that correct? Or should I be doing that should that be in their file?
So no, not necessarily. This is more on a district level. So districts have to actually run advertisements, so many times a year, as far as like attempting to locate students within the district that they suspect of having a disability. Okay. A lot of times you'll see like a newspaper ad, so that they hit everybody within the jurisdiction of the district. I will say that your district, if they're meeting this requirement under IDEA, then they have also met it for 504. Like it is one and the same, but it is a district requirement, not necessarily a school or teacher requirement.
So for me, the child find, I've only done one this year, and that's because the student, and he actually did test into special ed. And then my other question was, what is the discipline element you had mentioned?
So for students who have been removed from the educational setting for right at 10 days, so anything over 10 days, you actually have to hold a manifestation determination review and determine if that discipline issue, whatever happened, is a direct result of the student's disability. I promise your SPED department is doing it. Like that, this is kind of their bread and butter. They do these MDRs because after that, it's going to depend if it is found that it is if it's directly as a result of their disability, there's some things that you can and can't do as far as discipline procedures. So that's probably
being done at our admin office, so I don't need to worry about it.
Right. A lot of that discipline, that child find, that is district level stuff. That is not necessarily teacher level. But y'all just need to know that it's probably like you just need to be aware it happens.
Okay, thank you.
So y'all, I'm trying to go back in the chat and read. Yes, we're gonna discuss more than 504, y'all, I promise. We're just hitting that in the front. For gifted ed, y'all, you need to reach out to Matt Sheriff. Floyd answered that. I probably should read the answers before I read the questions too. Let's see. Is the limit also 10 days of out of school? Yes, it is. It is the same 10 days OSS for our students with 504, just like it is for our special education students. Something to be aware of, y'all, that OSS is any removal from the learning environment. So let's say a kid misbehaves and you call mom to come pick him up. That needs to be documented. That counts as a removal from the learning environment. Same holds true for special education kids, y'all. You can't just call mom and say, come pick him up and not count that as a day of removal kind of thing. At the high school, curious about the number of accommodations in the average 504 plan. So y'all, I will say, there's not like a set number. And we shouldn't be offering like a checklist or a menu. It's got to be very specific to what your student needs. I will say I would be cautious of not over accommodating them because we are getting, especially at high school, you're getting to the point where they're about to go to college, and y'all 504 follows a student to college, as that's different than an IEP. Now, universities, again, they have the opportunity to be very specific in their policies about who qualifies and what documentation they have to have. And they're afforded the opportunity to be very specific about what accommodations they'll provide. So yes, I would just be cautious. It depends on the child. But, be aware that, don't over accommodate, but you need to make sure you're providing what they need. Okay, y'all. Should a student be in the tier process before 504 is considered? Not necessarily. You're going to have some situations where 504 is like, let's say for diabetes, that's a big one we see. You may have a student who has diabetes who has no academic need whatsoever. They can rock and roll. They just need those accommodations in place to like be able to check their sugar or take a break when they need to eat a snack, those kinds of things. So y'all, accommodate or modifications. So I see a couple questions about modifications. we want to be real cautious about modifying things, because then you're changing the expectation of what's being learned. You need to go back and really look at that standard that you're trying to assess, and look at what's the intent of the standard? What are you trying to teach? Is it that you're modifying an assignment, or are you modifying the expectation? If they have a 504, do they have to be in tier? Not necessarily. What happens when we have 504 requests or ACT extended time? So ACT, y'all, because they're a private company, their documentation or what they request looks a little different. They can set their own requirements. So they may request a copy of the 504 plan. That's not uncommon, because that documents what's being provided to the student.
Excuse me, I just meant what happens when they are requesting a 504 because they want the extended time on ACT.
Okay, so that's going to be a little bit more. You guys need to, as a district, look at what the student's being provided and what you guys are doing. Like, is the student receiving that extra time maybe in the classroom, but it's undocumented? If so, we might need to look at a 504. If it's being provided and the student would qualify, maybe we need to have that in place for our school, and then get it for ACT. I will say, if you're not doing it, I wouldn't go write a 504 just because you need extended time on ACT. If the student's being successful at school and they don't need it, that's y'all's decision. But if it's being done, maybe kind of off the books, that we see that a lot. That students are being provided what they need, but it's just not documented. That may be a situation where we need to look at documenting it. So if a school is prepared to accommodate a student without a plan, is a 504 then necessary? So y'all, if you're providing the accommodations, if you're doing it, I'm going to tell you to document it. Put it on something, make it legal, because our students who maybe at the elementary level, the teacher's great, she's really provide these accommodations, just because it's what we should do. We're good teachers, y'all. We're providing what our kids need. But when they go to that secondary or that middle school, they may not do it, and you may get into a situation where the teacher says, well, I'm not doing that because I don't have to. You don't have anything that says I have to. So we may want to go ahead and put it in place. And y'all, give yourself credit. As a district or as teachers, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. Give yourself credit. Put it in a document, sure yourself up as far as anybody, because y'all, I'm here to tell you, the last people you want to have to talk to is OCR. The last people you want in your district is the Office for Civil Rights. I would go ahead and put it in place, just to protect yourself and to cover yourself. Okay, y'all, that was a lot in 30 minutes. And like we said, if you guys have a situation where you want to talk through maybe a hypothetical, you can send me an email. I'll set up a call, just me and you, and we can talk through things. If 504 or whatever related, because it is so broad and so gray. There may be situations that we're going to say it just depends. And that's where, and you guys may at the school level not have a lot of influence on this, but that's where it's really important that your district policy is very strong and lays out things that are very specific, because that is the standard that the district is held to.
And Ginger, I was just going to say, I know you mentioned this earlier, but do we still have districts that say we don't write 504s in our district? Like, is that still happening?
Yes, y'all. Okay. So I actually take parent calls around 504 too. When a parent has an issue with a district, they call me. Y'all, we can't say that. We cannot say we don't do 504. Anyone who receives federal funding is held to 504. I promise, as a school district, you are getting some type of federal funding. You are held to 504. You've got to. You've got to honor that request. You need to have specifically your eligibility, like go through your eligibility process. But y'all, please, 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 if you talk to any of your teachers, they cannot say we don't do 504 because you have to as a school. So and the question just came up, just to clarify, can a parent request 504 specifically, and then they have a parent requesting a comprehensive testing, but not the 504? I'm not sure about that question, but can a parent request 504 specifically? Yeah, y'all, a parent can call and request anything. They can request a 504. That's where your district policy has got to say, well, we've got to do a comprehensive, or we don't have to do a comprehensive. We can look at like a conglomeration of, or a preponderance of evidence, that kind of thing. I will say, y'all, the law does not say the law behind 504 does not say a comprehensive. It just says an evaluation. The student has to go through an evaluation to be determined eligible. Y'all, that evaluation can be looking at paperwork. It can be the team meeting and a preponderance of evidence. There's no set criteria for what an evaluation under 504 looks like.
So, Ginger, it's really up to the district to have that policy in place to lay out what your process is. So if you have a parent that requests a 504, then you say, okay, this is our process. And, that can be going through, the MTSS process, having, a 504 committee, like Ginger was saying, somebody that can come together and review all of that data to make that decision. Yeah.
Exactly. And y'all, that's the number one thing that I do tell parents when they call and they're upset. And I say, y'all, get a hold of the district's policy, because that's what they're held to. So you may want to, like I said, find your policy and be familiar with it. And this may be an opportunity where if it has some gaps or has some holes, that we can kind of beef it up.
Yeah. And also, like Ginger said, if you want, and it doesn't have to be, a formal meeting, but if you want like us to sit down with your 504 coordinator in your district, and it can just be a small, group of, 3 or 4 of us, we can schedule that to look at your policy and answer any of your questions. We'd be happy to schedule that. I would say, Ginger, for that, they could just email you.
Yes,
and then
absolutely.
we could set that up. Yeah. Okay. Any other 504 questions? If you have them, y'all just drop them in the chat box. And any other questions, MTSS, I'm going to stop recording and we'll shift to our other questions.